clown. All righty, grab your glasses, your eyeglasses. Here we go. Middle of page 20. That's what we're up to in Beyond Diagnosis. Let's consider the idea of insecure thinking. Who hasn't had an insecure thought? Like, why did my boss ask to see me? What if they laugh at me in the school play? Did I look did I lock the front door? Does this make me look fat? These thoughts are harmless, even amusing, when we're in a good mood. When we feel good, it's easy to dismiss them, and we often pay them no attention. In a healthy state of mind, our seemingly insecure or even inappropriate thoughts are of no consequence and travel through our minds like clouds in the sky. Well, that is really, really true, that paragraph. It's all true, but that one really sticks out for me. Thoughts are constantly moving through our minds. They come and go like the ticker tape at the bottom of a cable TV news show. The baseball results, the weather, the Dow Jones report, and other news are constantly passing by, but we pay little attention. The ticker tape doesn't even need our attention to keep moving. It's just a constant, never-ending flow. Our thoughts are much like that, constantly flowing. Sid Banks described thought as a spiritual energy, and as we know, energy constantly moves. It is only when we listen to thoughts and have a reaction, like fear, joy, or frustration, that it creates our experience. The principle of thought does not refer to already formed thoughts. So what is it? The principle of thought is formless before it comes into our consciousness, but while it's passing through our minds, it takes some kind of form. Every experience, from anxious thoughts to creativity, even images, sounds, and sensations like pain, are created by this spiritual energy. It is constantly creating our psychological experience, whether we understand it or not. Who wants to go from here?
Thoughts are neutral. I'll go. Thoughts are neutral until we have a reaction to them. The thought, did I lock the front door, is quite neutral. If we are in a good mood, this is a helpful thought. But if we are in a low mood, that thought will feel heavy and intense. As we start to sense that intensity, we start to feel some urgency, and then our nervous system kicks into action. It's a reliable system. Cortisol, adrenaline, and glucose are all being pumped into the bloodstream as we are bombarded with thoughts of home invasions and slaughter. When this kind of innocent thinking becomes a habit, it can escalate from the distinct possibility of losing some treasured objects to being convinced that we are going to be savagely attacked in our beds tonight. That one original neutral thought is how a life-threatening probability and this downward spiral can happen at lightning speed. Most of us can shake it off, but for those living daily life in a lower state of mind, this is a hell that knows no comfort. It becomes a bottomless pit of terror and isolation. The fact that there is nothing actually wrong is lost as reality spirals down and is replaced by a terrifying world of confusion and fear. What if this person who innocently slid into a world tortured by their own thoughts knew that they didn't have to listen to them? In his 2022 book, Healing, Thomas Insel, former director of NIM and founding director of the Center for Behavioral Neuroscience at Emory University, tells a moving story about his daughter, who, after recovering from bulimia, went on to become a social worker. One of her first assignments was in the Tenderloin district of San Francisco, infamous for drugs, crime, and single-room occupancy hotels. No one was showing up for their appointments with her. So as she waited, she taught herself to knit. Gradually, women came and knitted with her, and they formed a wonderful support group. They shared about their lives and the people they were knitting the scarves and sweaters for. It's heartwarming, but it gets better. The women then had the brilliant idea to set up a table in the adjacent wealthy neighborhood and sell their handmade crafts So to tourists and business people who are always cold in San Francisco's changeable climate. As a result, some of her clients were able to get off welfare and find homes, literally transforming their lives. This is an amazing story and one could all learn from. In the next paragraph, Incel's daughters say, look, I'm not saying that a knitting group cured their mental illness. These women all had a legacy of trauma and despair that selling a few sweaters would not erase. Stop. The lesson to be learned here is profound and one that I feel Dr. Incel and his lovely daughter totally missed. They failed to see that innate health of these women was right there under the despair and trauma that surfaced right where they were ready for. It came from inside of them, in Atos, out of their own innate wisdom as soon as the contaminated thinking fell away. The moment they were present and in better, safer state of mind, feeling their present moment, thinking their painful past could not hold them back. Their innate health didn't come from the group or its activities. Rather, it is who they really are under the insecure thinking. This wasn't a denial. This was innate health in action.
Beautiful. Anybody want to take it from here? Second paragraph on the top of page 22.
I will. The incels notice the importance of connection, that it is important part of life, but they stop just short of seeing what is actually creating our experience of connection. They and many others see it as coming from something on the outside. Therefore, in the business of changing those outside things, even emotions, feelings, and thoughts are in order to feel better. But connection doesn't create well-being. That's the wrong way around. That's the cart before the horse. We are in touch with our well-being. We automatically feel connected. In our digital age, loneliness and isolation have become a big issue. Dr. Vivek Murthy, the US Surgeon General, was quoted recently as saying that loneliness is now considered to be as bad physiologically as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Cars and air travel have made it easier and easier for us to move away from the support of our families and childhood friends. But we all know, either from personal experience or from clients and patients, that being with family doesn't necessarily make us feel good. When I lived in America, I would hear horrendous family stories every November as the prospect of spending time with family for Thanksgiving and impending holidays seemed to push people over the edge. Think about it for a moment. Family is a form of connection, but if it was just the fact of family that was creating the experience, then we would all love to spend more time with our families, and many of us don't. So maybe it needs to be the right kind of family. Family dynamics are the bread and butter of most therapists who work long and dedicated hours to help people cope. We all know families where one or more members are enjoying that loving connection and others in the same family at the same Thanksgiving table aren't. So who is right? Whose version of the family is the right one? Ask yourself this: what if each member of the family actually experiencing, whether you are trained in family system therapy, CBT, life coaching, or just find your family very annoying? Can you see that each person is experiencing their own thoughts about their loved ones?
Beautiful. Anybody want to jump in? Towards the bottom of 22.
I'll go.
Okay, Cynthia.
We live in a thought-created world 100% of the time. We are never feeling our circumstances. We are only ever feeling our thinking about our circumstances. When Sid Beck said, there is only one genetic mental illness, an inability to see the role of thought, he was pointing to this fact. Let's look at the knitting group story from this understanding that we all have innate mental health. I lived in San Francisco for a year and am familiar with this neighborhood. The people there come from all kinds of despair, veterans, immigrants, sex workers, others below the poverty line, and many with mental health problems. The Tenderloin is a high crime neighborhood, a particularly violent street crime, such as robbery and aggravated assault. People find themselves there as a last resort, a result of spiraling down, many using drugs and alcohol to numb the experience. We all know that substance abuse, self-harm, and geographics are a way to cope. But like the woman that Dr. Lang tried to help in Scotland, schizophrenia and psychosis could also be desperate ways to cope with an unbearable life. It might even be a kind of wisdom to inoculate themselves against an unsafe world. What if it's not mental illness? What if it's a kind of psychological innocence? In this very low state, reaching out for help, even from the kindest social worker, is like climbing a mountain. And when you're exhausted from all the other things, it would be understandable to think, what's the point? I imagine that the women who showed up for the knitting group, were very curious at first, but there must have been a hopeful thought that maybe this time it would be different. Maybe a free cup of coffee and a cigarette, maybe a new friend. Their innate health and wisdom were there under the insecure, neurotic, anxious thoughts. In other words, something inside pointed them in a healthy direction. Sitting in the group, they start to relax a little. A joke, a kind word, a little hope, and their mood shifts to lift. Or their mood starts to lift. They come back next week. They may have been back in the darkness in between groups, but they know that they can feel a little better when they're with their knitting friends. Is that good feeling coming from knitting, from the group, from the room, from the group? No, it's coming from their slightly better thinking. Connection is the experience of feeling some nice thinking. Connection is the experience of feeling some nice thinking. How many of us have felt better after a massage, a visit to an acupuncturist, or even a movie, a walk on the beach, or compliments on that project presentation? If we innocently think that good feeling is coming from the location or the circumstances, then we will have to keep going back to the treatments or to the beach, the knitting group, or the therapist, looking for that good feeling. Some of us cope in other ways by spending a lifetime seeking compliments and approval, but always looking for things on the outside to fix us. But this is a misunderstanding. What if these women had been told that the good feelings they were experiencing were coming from inside? What if they knew that the good feeling was evidence of their spiritual nature and innate resilience, that this is who they really are and is with them all the time, that it can be at any moment? That resilience isn't something that has to be acquired or learned. That it is truly innate.
Beautiful.
We should
I
pause.
love,
Can you repeat that quote even just one more time?
yeah,
What?
right?
Could you repeat that quote one more time that was duplicated?
The one that what if they knew?
In the middle.
No, in the middle, the connection.
Connection is the experience of feeling some nice thinking. Yeah, I love that you repeated that twice, and
Yeah.
it deserves a third time. Thanks, Leah. Yeah, isn't that a great line?
Yeah.
Connection is the experience of feeling some nice thinking. It's true. Even connection to ourselves
Yeah.
when we're in a nice thinking, feeling state. Yeah, when we're not outside bothered by stuff. Anybody want to go next, or should I pick up where we ended? Yeah. What if they understood that it's never their circumstances that create good feelings, that every painful thought they've ever had has moved on? What if they understood that they were not broken and never had been? that their trauma was in the past cannot get stuck, and it was their innate resilience that was carrying them forward? What if they knew that their past is not who they are and saw how their wisdom was working just beautifully right when they needed it? This is the amazing thing about the story. Their innate resilience came through and powered them to get up and take care of themselves. It came from them. Selling their handmade crafts was inspired. And in that moment, they were free of their traumatic past. They weren't in denial. They were in the present moment where the past does not exist. Some therapists still insist on taking us back into the past, but they are innocently dragging us out of the power of the present moment and back into a world of pain. Dr. George Pransky, a psychologist with 60 years of experience, described this in his book as low mood therapy. Low mood therapists are dedicated professionals. They're so dedicated, they're even willing to feel down in order to do their jobs. This is a quote in the book, by the way. The burnout for low mood therapists comes fast, often in 4 or 5 years. If they knew that keeping their clients in a low mood was counterproductive, they would surely do things differently. When we live, and I could attest to that, and Elaine too, when we live in the feeling of the present moment, we slow down. We're at peace. I don't know the women from the knitting group, but their wisdom shone off the page as they left their past behind and made new lives for themselves. There was nothing to cure or fix because they were never broken. Sid Banks once said that mental health is contentment. Oh, I'm going to read that line again. Mental health is contentment. And it comes and goes for every human. There are moments of contentment in the minds of the most struggling. Dr. George Pransky was one of the first psychologists to meet Sydney Banks. In 1974, George and his wife Linda heard about Sid from a colleague and went to Salt Spring Island near Vancouver to hear him speak. But what came next was a bit of a shock for George. This is his account of their first conversation. The full text can be found in Jack Pransky's book, Paradigm Shift, and is reprinted here with kind permission. Sydney Banks said, "Is it true that you're a mental health professional who helps people?" George Pransky says, "Yes, absolutely." Sydney Banks, "If you wouldn't mind, I've never met a mental health professional. I consider myself in a way in the mental health business. I try to help the well-being of humanity as best I can and ease the suffering that people have, even though I don't have any degrees or anything. I just like it's what I've been thrust into. I just feel like it's what I've been thrust into. I didn't have a choice. I have no idea what a mental health professional does to help people. So if you wouldn't mind, and if it's not putting you out, I would love to hear what you do in your work." George Pransky says, "Well, I take the person back into their memories to heal their memories." Sid says, "How would you do that?" George says, "Well, it's a little bit like Freud did." Sid says, "Well, what did Freud do?" George answers, "Well, he had people lie on a couch and free associate, just talk off the tops of their heads about memories they had in childhood, and he would listen and take notes. But we do have these exercises like asking people to remember a time when they were resentful." Everybody listening started laughing, but Sid stopped them. Sid said, "Well, what else do you do?" George, I mean, this is all true. George tells Sid in some detail about his work based on Gestalt therapy. And remember, this dates back to like 1974. Hopefully the field has come a distance. Sid Banks, can I ask you some questions about this just so I can understand this better? George says, sure. And Sid says, well, George, it sounds to me like that would be really uncomfortable and unpleasant for people. Well, yeah, I said that was the case. It is hard for them, but Sid is part of the process. See, people go into the process and they go through this admitted pain and suffering, but it's for a purpose. And when they come out the other end, then they're feeling good, they're healthy. Elaine and I are hysterical. Sid says, do they come out the other end healthy? I mean, you just know it's totally innocent questions coming from a place deeper than any conditioning. George says, George doesn't quite register the question. So Sid repeats it. Sid says, well, you said that they go in and they're unhealthy and they go through this process. They are healthy. I'm sorry. I just can't stop. So they go through this painful process and then they are healthy. And I want to know if they do, in fact, come out at the other end healthy. George says, well, not very often. Not very often. Sid, you know, there are tens of thousands of mental health professionals, and some of them are unhappy themselves. They have broken marriages. They're using alcohol and drugs. This is an unbelievably stressful profession. They take their stress home with them. I don't see how it's realistic for them to be helping people by talking about happiness, because some of them don't know anything about happiness. All they know about is mental illness and treating mental illness. And that is kind of how the profession is defined. It's not defined as a happiness vendor or provider. It is defined as treating real illnesses. Sid says, well, if they're not happy themselves, then it would seem that they are the wrong profession. It would be like a mechanic who couldn't even fix his own car, helping other people fix theirs. I mean, isn't it amazing how so common sense? Sid is just talking common sense here. But that was not, was not in the field of mental health. No more than bloodletting, in the field of innocent. People really believe this stuff. Mary could speak to that, the field of medicine, right? Bloodletting, they thought pus meant that the wound was healing, not that it was infected. They would put scalpels in the pocket, not knowing about germs infecting wounds, So humanity is in this evolution. We still have a half an hour. Who wants to do I Have Come Home? Chapter 6, page 27. I have come home.
My apologies, ladies. I don't have my book, so I'm sorry I can't help you read today.
Next time. All right.
I can start.
All right.
I have come home. After Sidney Banks had his initial spiritual experience, he turned to his wife and he said, I'm free. I've come home. Many of the people Sid worked with had the same experience, and you will hear that same realization in many of the personal stories that follow. What is this feeling of coming home, and how does this help us with mental illness? Sid taught that when we feel love and connection, we are being our true selves. We are home. That's just interesting right there. Realizing our true spiritual nature is the only remedy we need for mental distress. and we don't need to work at it because our true nature will reveal itself when our minds are calm and free of insecure thoughts. I am certain that if you were able to observe anyone at the beginning of any of the 300 diagnoses listed in the DSM, you would see that it began because their true nature of innate health was innocently covered up by prolonged stressful thinking, followed by the pathologizing of their very human behavior. I'm struck. I keep getting struck with there is also, I think, an element where people have ingested their stressful thinking, and whether it's conscious or unconscious, most of the time it's unconscious, to the point where in the present there is physical distress. And so you don't have to go back to it. It is now. And I know that Hannah experienced that kind of painful, it's not physical pain that she talks about, and that she's put this book together. I keep expecting her at some point to be talking about those who don't have to go back to some traumatic experience, what George was talking about, but experience right here, right now, pain, headaches, upset. So and certainly if you've been living under stress for a long, long time, it feels very physical, very now. You're not being brought back to it. So I just put that out as a point of discussion, maybe. And I could keep reading, though. Anyway, true nature, innate health, and the feeling of coming home are all different ways to describe the spiritual experience of life. Knowing that we are thinking of the thoughts that block or hide our true nature is the key to freedom. If you know that you are the thinker and that thoughts are neutral, always moving, then there's no need to be frightened by them. Thoughts pass like clouds. The sky isn't perturbed by weather or birds or airplanes. They're all just passing through. We all work the same way. There's no exception. It's only the degree to which we have each got caught up that we suffer. As Sid Banks often said, we are all one thought away from good mental health. How could he be so certain? I'll pass on that.
Do we want to talk a little bit about that? I mean, have any of you, to segue on what Cynthia was saying about we have pain and then we're into something in the present moment and we forget about our physical pain. Same with our mental pain. Have you had that happen in your real? I can definitely attest to the fact that that happens in my world. How about the rest of you?
Give an example, Lori.
Give an example. Well, I mean, like I could be going out for a walk and I have stuff on my mind and my to-do list and, that kind of rattled mind. And then on my walk, I notice how beautiful it is. I get out of my head for a moment. I just happen to see the beauty of nature and this mother walking by with the baby carriage. And I'm like, oh, I got to see this baby's face. I'm not thinking about my to-do list.
When you were out walking, did you have physical pain that you were dealing with?
Yeah, that was my mental pain. I
get that. I get this all about mental pain, but I think that there is a connection to physical pain.
Yes.
Given that I have
absolutely
many people in my lives that are expressing physical pain, which I do think is related to stressful, conscious or unconscious. How do you experience physical pain in a way that you can let that go? One of the obvious things is you have physical pain and you go, oh God, this must mean I have a tumor or cancer. You can awfulize about physical pain for sure.
Yeah.
Or you can also awfulize it with just this, God, this feels so awful. I don't want to feel this way. And so it's, how do you then just sort of say, well, it is just a sensation. You know, it's not, doesn't mean anything necessarily. Then again, in our new world, I mean, we are beyond bloodletting, and we are into saying, well, it's possible that you do have cancer, or you know, whatever X, Y, or Z is. It doesn't also then, to take that even further, is if X, Y, or Z is found through the medical system, it doesn't mean that that has to rule the rest of your life either.
Mhm.
Done, I should say.
Donna's a perfect example of that. Holy cow.
My
Elaine, I think you have an example to physical pain and noticing how it comes and it goes, depending on your focus on it. Could you speak to that? I also have an example when I broke my arm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Were you talking to me about
Oh,
that?
Mary or Elaine? Yeah, I know both of you.
Up about the physical pain too, and it reminds me of when I get the physical pains, particularly when I'm working, that the mental pain or the stress of what's going on in my life is creating this, and it's reminding me, okay, now it's time to get up and walk away, or now it's time to, you know, go take that walk, or it makes me realize it's unfortunate that it comes to the point that I can't get ahead, like I have to experience that physical pain before I realize, oh yeah, it's time to walk away. I'm hoping that at some point I can get to where I don't experience that physical pain and I realize that it's time to get up and walk away. But definitely there's a connection between the
Mhm.
pain, and when we were reading that, it just definitely touched me.
Mhm.
And before you knew that, my guess is you would just push through.
Oh God.
Mhm.
Yes, I was in far more pain. Absolutely. I wouldn't get up, you know, I would
Yep.
sit, I'd have to go to the
Keep
bathroom,
going.
up to, you know, and my pain was excruciating. It took, you know, coming and being in a group like this and reading and understanding, to realize that I didn't have to live in pain. It's not the kind of pain I'm living in. And I mean, granted, I still have it, but I understand where it's coming from, and I know, at least from what I'm experiencing, it's not cancer, or it's not, you know, something horribly physical, other than the fact that it's in my mind, and I'm allowing it
Mhm.
to be there. And if I can just stop it before it's that fine line between, you know, like walking away before I have the pain. It's
Mhm.
practice that I have to continue working on.
Or
And
it's just no work, right? It's just noticing. Like when you notice, oh God, time for a break, you know.
Right.
Yeah, that's what you mean by
It's really no work to it.
walking away. It means like walking away, if you will, on using a geographical cure for an emotional issue. It's like I need to step away physically from what I'm doing because I'm so wrapped up in my thinking about it. Or, I mean, I sense it myself. I'm aware that there's a lot of tension and pain in my body, and I also just, it's related to stress. It's related to my gripping, trying to, you know, figure these things out, kind of thing. But if for a lot of people are presenting to me, people in my life, with a lot of physical pain, that you know, they look and look and look in the doctor's world, and there isn't anything in the doctor's world other than, you know, you can elevate your blood pressure, that's for sure, you know, or you
Mhm.
can't sleep, or, you know, all that kind of stuff. But ultimately, yeah, I don't know how, as a practitioner, if that's what you're doing, how do you help somebody who's, yeah, struggling there? And I get, you know, getting up and walking away, or helping them talk about that, what that process is, walking away from it somehow.
Mhm.
You know?
Elaine, you were gonna say something. Yeah.
So my experience has been where it's all about the thought. So when I worked at Natchog Hospital and working with children for a very long time, I developed neck pain.
Mm.
And I had that neck pain for several months and I didn't think anything about it. Like I just assumed it was stress, but it got increasingly worse. So I did go to the doctor. And like you said, Cynthia, there was nothing physically wrong with me. Nothing. And one day I was talking to one of my colleagues who happened to be a nurse, and she presented me with the idea of starting to wear scarves. Strange, right?
Yeah.
So I started to wear scarves. And in about a week to 2 weeks, the pain was gone because what I did was I changed the thought. I changed the thought to thinking about how nice and wonderful it would be to wear scarves. So I started buying scarves and I stopped thinking about the stress of what was causing that pain. And I have not had serious neck pain since, and it's been over 20 years.
Wow.
Because again, it's all about the thought, the anxiety of the type of work that I was doing, the level of intensity with the kids that I was working with. I
Yeah.
made it my own. Like I took it home every single night.
I
Those
bet.
kids were suicidal and I had to send them to the hospital, and I would worry and worry and worry about them being in the hospital and how they were getting treated. I would worry about the parents and how the parents were navigating the kids being in the hospital. And I would worry and worry and worry. And that's why I had all that neck pain. I even bought special pillows to help
Yeah.
my neck pain. And all I had to
Ah.
do was change the thought. And those scarves, I still have those scarves and they're absolutely beautiful. And once I'm done with menopause, I can start wearing those scarves again.
The placebo effect, isn't it? You know?
Yeah.
Placebo effect. Yeah,
And you-
because
and you-
she was thinking about the scarves,
Yeah.
not like, everybody who has neck pain should go and get a scarf. It just so happened that even the person who suggested to Elaine to get a scarf, we don't know what her thinking was about that suggestion, but isn't it interesting that Elaine's focus went to, oh, this feels good, this scarf, or what scarf am I going to wear tomorrow? It
Right. I was
My
coordinating my outfits
best
with my
was when
scarves.
you,
right.
what's that?
A good thing, because around my neck, I hold something beautiful. Is around my neck. I hold, look at, see here now, my neck has got something beautiful. And so I think of my neck now as a place to hold beauty as opposed to a place to hold pain. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. I
Yeah.
got people
Yeah.
here. People I know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have any um experiences with pain coming and going? Actually, I remember George Pransky talking about this, where he would go, he would play tennis, or no, because it was through a door. I think it was badminton, not, one of those racquetball. That's what it was, racquetball, I think. And he was in a hurry to get out to the court, and he put his fist through a glass door. He didn't even realize, he was so focused on got to get to the court. And the guy on the other side of the court says, George, what happened? It was blood coming down his arm. And when George looked at it, he realized, oh, that hurts.
Mm.
Isn't that wild?
Mm.
And it's also the story you might have heard of, the person who's in an accident, their partner
Yeah.
is strapped to the seat and they want to go see how their partner's doing. So they kind of get around to the other side and unstrap the partner. And once they realize the partner's okay, they realize they were hobbling to get there because their leg was broken.
Mhm.
They did not feel pain as long as they were so focused on
Right.
their partner. So you
Right.
can't make yourself, I haven't found a way to make myself be focused on something else. It's just one of those things that happens in life. But knowing that happens in life helps. You know, so we kind of knowing that without realizing, we look for something, excuse me, to take the mind off of the pain. But what people do when they're in pain is they talk about it. And they're looking for comfort and sympathy from other
Right.
people,
Right.
which they don't realize it's keeping the pain alive.
Yeah.
Realize the innocence of that. Has anybody had any experiences like Cynthia was talking about where somebody in your life is in pain, and how do you know, help them or
I'll,
help yourself first?
I'll share a story, Lori. So my mom, who's 82, there's just, every time I talk to her at least once a day, sometimes 3 times a day. And there's always a pain. There's always the knees, the shoulder, the back, the whatever. And one night we were all supposed to go out to dinner, her and my daughters, and she didn't want to go out anymore because she reached for a cabinet, but the door was open and she had jammed her thumb. And she said the pain was just excruciating. Okay, so we decided to pick up dinner, picked up a pizza and salad and brought it to her house. And she's walking very gingerly like this. Well, she does drink soda. She likes Diet Pepsi. So I noticed that about 10 minutes into dinner, and now she's engaged in conversation with her 2 granddaughters. She's playing with the top of the can like this with the thumb. The little tab on a soda.
Yeah.
Like, Mom, is that the thumb that you jammed? Oh, she goes, yeah, I guess it feels better. So 10 minutes ago, it was so painful, we could not go out to dinner. And then within 10 minutes of some really nice thinking, engaging with her grandchildren, it was gone. Like, it was a miracle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for me, like, and I've seen, this is just one example of hundreds I could give you. Like, I just really struggle with how to help her, because she's not very open to, it's just her thoughts, and her tired thinking brings on tired thoughts. I mean, I've tried 7 ways to Sunday, if you will, to help reframe it, and I'm not getting anywhere. So I've decided to just gracefully accept it because I am beating my head against a wall, and
Mhm.
and it's her journey, and I'm trying to let her age gracefully, which is a challenge, because obviously no one wants to see their mom or someone they love in pain and creating her own suffering. But I also don't know how to help her. So
Mhm.
yeah, so
You know
I've
what's
observed it.
That's a great story. Thanks so much. Yeah. I mean, I could so relate to that. I'm sure everybody else too. There was something, I think I saw it in a Jamie Smart webinar about how people complain that, like, victim. He used the term victim mode as a way, not realizing it, as a way to connect with people. That really hit me. Like, I started thinking about clients that I have
Mhm.
and how they get so stuck in victim mode. And it made sense, like, wow, it does feel innocent. They're so innocent. They just want, like everybody, we just want to be loved, acknowledged, noticed, accepted. And so
Yeah.
that's the way the universe, though, the way people cope with this need for connection is complaining.
Yeah. Which then doesn't that just further innocently further their suffering?
Yeah.
Extends the suffering, deepens the suffering. It's like,
Mhm.
what a funny thing
Yes.
that is, huh?
Especially,
Not only that, it brings the other person into the suffering with them, but they're oblivious to that.
Yeah.
So is the medicine, is the anecdote, first love?
Mm,
Just
Yeah.
love them.
just love them.
You know, I don't know if any of you, if you saw the webinar that Steph Sipichowski and I did, Hope and Possibility. He talks about how his father used to irk the living daylights out of him. His father was an angry guy and he would get really irked by him. And then he did a program with Michael Neal and he decided, I'm going to try out this listening thing. He just listened to his father. It's so touching. I want to cry right now, just, going back to that story. He said, and they were at odds with each other. He just listened to him without judgment. His father put his hand on Steph's lap and said, you really do love me.
Mm.
I mean, they were like older. The father was like, I think 90, something like that, if I recall. Isn't that amazing? And from that moment on, their whole relationship changed.
Yeah.
Listening, just listening with compassion and love and
without
seeing
judgment.
innocence.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's hard. I mean, even as you say those words, and I know you didn't say them to me, you said them out loud, of course, to everyone. Like I can see where my own judgments are. Any one of you could call me and tell me about your thumb pain because you jammed your thumb, and I would hold it with such compassion. And yet when it comes to my mom, I can't help it. I have such judgment around it.
Yep.
It's so funny that she is obviously one of the people I love the most in this whole world, and yet at the same time, someone who I hold judgment with.
Exactly.
Go figure.
Exactly. And it's easy to say, well, approach them with love, but when that's not your response, then it's my response is my outside in, you
Yeah.
are, because you are my mother, my husband, my sister, my friend, whatever. And you are presenting continually in this negative way. And so the thought becomes, my life would be better without you there doing that, So how do you accept what is in your life that is not what you want and what you see as being a net negative and not and hold them as innocently misunderstanding and still somehow open. It's physician heal thyself kind of thing. It's like you have to start with being somehow okay in the space of being with something that is you don't like. Say it that way. Judgment, but there's judgment. Like you don't really want to hold your hand on. It would really hurt to do that. You know what I mean? Or there are certain things that it can really is unpleasant to experience. And again, so is their pain. So is in their world pain, and in those examples.
Yeah. Yeah.
It occurs to me that both of you and all of us, we have love for a parent, a partner, a child, and we don't want them to feel bad. I mean, that's the love in us. We want them to feel good because we love them. So we try to take their pain away from them. And the more we try to take their pain away from them, we're, like Leanne said, we're in judgment.
Mhm.
And that doesn't feel very loving.
Yeah.
Anybody notice that when you get judged, it doesn't feel like that person is loving you?
Mm.
And the judgment is actually coming from a loving place, but it's coming out as thinking you have to fix them or change them
Yeah.
or make them better.
Wow.
Mm.
So interesting, isn't it? And innocent.
Mm.
Mm.
It's like when a kid falls down and the parent will make a big deal about it. The pain lasts longer. It hurts more. And when the parent says, oh, let's go clean it off, put a Band-Aid on, and then they're good. they were out playing again.
My next door neighbor used to say that to her kids, if you hurt yourself, I'll kill you.
No pain there.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
it's so interesting and again, I'll go back to my example of my mom, is to let her have her journey.
Yes.
It's not mine, it's not the one I would choose. And it's certainly, as I age, I now see the way I do not want to age.
Yeah.
And how obviously I've been gifted this lovely group of women in front of me, and this insight and this exposure to the three principles. So I'm happy for that. And I'm so happy for that. And at the same time, be like, well, if that's her journey and that's what she wants to do, then I have to be okay with the thing that I don't want to be okay with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like you were saying, yeah, that's it right there. Boom. Yeah.
Okay with the thing you don't want to be okay with. That's really interesting, huh?
Yeah.
Having to be okay. Yeah. With the thing we don't want to be okay with.
Mhm.
Yeah.
There's a lot in that, isn't there? This doesn't relate to pain, but it was like, the years I spent being in pain, emotional pain about being single, not being able to find the right partner for myself, and being on a million dating sites and blah, blah, blah. I have a lot of jokes about that now, but man, it was like that person no longer exists.
Mm.
No longer exists
Wow.
because of trust in universal intelligence. It's not up to me. It's not up to me to make my life be the way I think it should be.
Mhm.
Mm.
Oh, there was something I wrote down from a client the other day. It was so powerful. She said, nothing matters.
Mm.
Isn't that heavy? Nothing matters. Nothing matters except the things we think matters.
Mm.
Mhm.
Yeah.
How deep? That is really deep, isn't it?
Mm.
Because, any of us can look back on our lives and say, oh, we didn't do that very well. We goofed on that. We shouldn't have done that thing. We shouldn't have gotten with that person, blah, 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 right? Thinking about at age 16, I begged my girlfriend to teach me how to smoke cigarettes so I could be cool.
Yeah.
Of course, I developed a habit. I mean, I was puking trying to learn how to smoke cigarettes. So stupid things like that we've all done in our past. And when you see the innocence that everybody, including partners, mothers, kids, everybody, ourselves, doing the best we can with how things look to us in that moment, with what we see about life and reality. And when we see better, we do better.
Mhm.
And we can't make ourselves see better.
Yeah.
It happens. It's an evolution. And, like Leanne was saying, I love that you just want your mom to feel better. And so you try to teach her how to feel better.
Right.
Well, I've done that.
Mhm.
I've done that. I did that when I was, just getting wind of how to share the principles with people. I made the mistake of sharing it with relatives. So I had, a cousin who's older, and she was on Zoloft and still pretty anxious. And so I would try to share the principles. And she said, well, I'm glad it works for you.
Yeah.
And that, that closed the conversation. And that was so many years ago. So she would not even, if If she saw the three principles, she would be totally turned off to it because of the innocence. And, I did the best I could in presenting it, wanting her to not have to take meds and be less anxious.
Yeah.
So we're all doing the best we can, and whoa, yeah. It's so great talking about this, right? That we
Mhm.
all have a shared knowing of what we're talking about because we have this internal experience. We can all relate
Mm.
to whatever your internal experience is. Either been there, done that, or I get it.
Mm.
You can see how, the innocence of the human brain trying to figure it out, trying to make sense of everything.
Yeah.
And I say that, the brain was used to calculate, figure out math problems, when to go to sleep so you can be up on time, calculations, not trying to figure out how to fix ourselves or fix other people. That's where we went wrong, overusing the brain. Yay.
Yeah.
Any last words? We got 2 more minutes.
Well, therapists are about trying to fix other people. So you're treading a fine line there, or helping them see how they can improve upon what they're experiencing now. So how did I can't imagine quite how you approach that without, I don't know, wanting to help fix them.
That's what this book is all about.
Right.
That nobody needs fixing because our soul, who we are when we're at home, that the chapter we stopped on, we're perfect. And even as humans, we're perfectly imperfect. No human does everything perfectly. But that spiritual essence, pure consciousness, pure love, before the contamination of all the conditioned thinking that we do.
Mm.
It's just the conditioned thinking, the way we've learned to think, that gets in the way of pure consciousness and love.
Mm.
Isn't that wild?
Mhm.
Yeah. So once you realize, oh, that was just the way I was conditioned to think about money, for instance. Yeah. That's yeah, when I look back and I see how, my frugality comes from my wanting to help my parents because they would complain about money a lot. And so I would be really careful not to spend their money to my own detriment.
Mhm.
And my brother went in the opposite direction. And it's just funny to see how we make sense of something that is made up. It's just a story
I
we
need to
made up.
up this call, but thank you guys.
Yeah,
Bye.
Cynthia, thanks for
care.
joining us. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Lori.
Yeah.
Thank
Thanks for coming. See
Yep.
you
Happy
guys.
Have a nice
Thanksgiving, everybody.
Thanksgiving.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Happy Thanksgiving, right? Tomorrow. Wow.
Yes. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.